She was hanging between life and death, barefoot, bleeding, one hand slipping on the rope. The wind pulled at her torn white dress, as if the land itself wanted to finish what cruel men had started. Beneath her, the ground waited patiently, and only a few steps away stood a rancher in a black hat, watching. He did not run. He did not shout. He did not reach for his gun. He simply stood there beside his horse, eyes locked on the woman hanging from the oak tree. In the Wild West, moments like this decided who lived and who was remembered. The plains stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun. Golden grass swayed like an ocean, broken only by a crooked fence line and a lonely ranch house far in the distance. The sky was wide, pale blue, calm, too calm for what was happening beneath the old oak tree. The rope creaked softly. The woman's name was Lydia Hale. Her arm trembled violently as she clung to the rope above her head. Every breath scraped her throat raw. Dust clung to her skin, mixing with sweat and dried blood along her ribs and waist. Her feet dangled inches above the ground, not high enough to kill her quickly, not low enough to save her. Someone had planned this. Her vision blurred, then sharpened again as she forced her eyes open. That was when she saw him. A man stood several yards away, framed perfectly by the open land behind him. He wore a dark vest, a weathered shirt, and a red bandana at his neck. A wide-brimmed black hat shaded his face, but she could see his eyes clearly. They were calm, cold almost. Beside him stood a strong chestnut horse, reins hanging loose, ears flicking toward the rope, and the woman struggling beneath the tree. Lydia's heart slammed against her ribs. "Help me," she whispered. The man did not answer. His name was Ethan Cole, and he knew better than anyone that the Wild West punished men who acted before they understood the cost. A rancher who had seen too much. Ethan had ridden across this land for over 15 years. He had seen hangings, burnings, men shot over nothing more than a look. He had learned that not every rope meant murder, and not every victim was innocent. But this was different. The rope wasn't tied as a noose. It looped tightly around Lydia's waist and chest, biting into her skin. Someone wanted her alive. Someone wanted her to suffer. Ethan studied her injuries. Bruised wrists, torn fabric, no brand, no town mark, not a lawful punishment. His jaw tightened. "Who did this?" he finally asked. Lydia swallowed hard. "The men who own the South land," she gasped. "They said I stole cattle." Ethan glanced toward the horizon. "No cattle tracks." "A lie. They left you here? They said they'd be back when the sun moves." Ethan followed the lengthening shadows. Not long now. The horse knows before the man does. Ethan's horse stamped the ground nervously. That was when Ethan heard it. Hooves. Distant. Slow. Intentional. Lydia heard them too. Panic surged through her exhausted body. "They're coming," she cried. "Please, don't leave me." Ethan stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against dry earth. "I'm not leaving," he said quietly, "but you need to listen." Her fingers slipped slightly on the rope. "I can't hold on much longer." Ethan pulled his knife halfway from its sheath, eyes never leaving the horizon. "If I cut you down now," he said, "they'll shoot you before you hit the ground." Tears streamed down her face. "Then what do we do?" Ethan slid the knife back. "We wait. For riders and a lie. For men rode into view, dust curling around their horses like smoke." The leader wore a cruel smile and carried himself like a man who'd never been told no. His eyes locked onto Ethan immediately. "Well," he drawled, "looks like we've got ourselves an audience." Ethan tipped his hat slightly. "Afternoon." The leader laughed. "You picked a bad place to stop, rancher." Ethan's voice stayed steady. "Looks like you picked a bad way to treat a woman." The men chuckled. "She's a thief," the leader said. "Burned our barn. Tried to run." "That's so," Ethan replied. "Funny thing is fires leave marks." The leader's smile faltered. Ethan took one slow step forward. "You let her down," Ethan said. and right away. The leader's hand moved toward his gun. You don't give orders here. Ethan's eyes hardened. I just did. The shot that changed everything. The leader drew. The sound of the gunshot shattered the quiet plains. Lydia screamed as the rope jerked violently, snapping her body sideways. Ethan moved at the same instant, drawing and firing with deadly precision. One rider fell. Another screamed and tumbled from his horse. The remaining two scattered, firing wildly. Bullets tore bark from the oak tree. Ethan rolled, came up firing again. Silence followed. Dust settled. Only one rider remained, already fleeing toward the horizon. Cutting the rope. Lydia's grip failed. Ethan reached her just as she slipped. His knife flashed. The rope snapped. She fell straight into his arms. He hit the ground hard, taking the impact as Lydia gasped for breath against his chest. It's over, he said softly. You're safe. She clutched his vest, sobbing. For the first time that day, the prairie exhaled. The fire cracked softly inside the ranch house. Lydia lay wrapped in a thick wool blanket on Ethan Cole's narrow bed, her breathing finally steady. The lantern light painted warm shadows across the wooden walls, but sleep refused to come easily. Every time her eyes closed, she felt the rope burn her skin again, felt the ground pulling her down. Ethan sat at the small table, cleaning his revolver in silence. Neither of them spoke. Out here, words were often unnecessary and sometimes dangerous. You didn't have to bring me here, Lydia said quietly at last. Ethan didn't look up. That oak tree wasn't planning on letting you live. She swallowed. They'll come. I know. That was the truth that sat heavy between them, a past that never stayed buried. When the moon rose high, Lydia finally slept. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the night air cool against his face. His horse shifted softly in the corral. Coyotes howled somewhere far off, their cries echoing across the land like ghosts. He rested his hands on the porch rail. This wasn't the first woman he'd pulled from a rope. Years ago, he'd been too late. That memory never left him. A rancher learned to live with ghosts in the West, or he didn't live long at all. Behind him, the floor creaked. Lydia stood in the doorway, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. You look like a man waiting for trouble, she said. Ethan turned slowly. I am. The truth comes out. They accused me of stealing cattle, Lydia said, stepping closer to the lantern light. But that wasn't it. Ethan waited. My father owned land south of the creek. Good land. They wanted it. Ethan's eyes narrowed. When my father refused, their cattle started showing up on our side of the fence. Then the threats came. And the barn? Ethan asked. Lydia shook her head fiercely. They burned their own barn. Blamed me. Ethan exhaled slowly. Men like that didn't stop. They escalated. They'll come for you now, Lydia said. You killed 2 of them. Ethan met her gaze. No, they died because they chose the wrong kind of man to stand in front of. The West never forgets a face. By morning, the plains were alive again. Sunlight spilled across the grass, as if nothing had happened. Lydia helped where she could, her movements slow but determined. Ethan watched her carefully, noticing the way she favored her side, the way her eyes constantly scanned the horizon. You don't scare easy, he said. I'm tired of being scared, she replied. Ethan mounted his horse before noon. I'm riding into town. Lydia stiffened. They'll be there. Good, Ethan said. I want them to see me. The town that looked away. The town of Red Hollow hadn't changed. Same dusty street. Same crooked sheriff's office. Same men pretending not to notice injustice as long as it didn't knock on their door. Ethan tied his horse and stepped inside the saloon. Conversation died instantly. The remaining 2 men from the oak tree sat at a corner table, eyes burning with hate. The leader wasn't there. Yet, Ethan walked to the bar. Whiskey, he said. One of the men stood. You got nerve showing your face here. Ethan turned slowly. You got nerve thinking I wouldn't. Hands hovered near guns. The sheriff stepped out of his office, uneasy. "Take it outside." Ethan smiled coldly. "That's exactly where it'll end." The man behind the rope. The saloon doors burst open. A tall man with silver at his temples stepped inside, coat sweeping behind him like a shadow. His eyes locked onto Ethan instantly. "Rourke," Ethan said. The leader of the landowners smiled. "Cole." So they knew each other. "You interfered," Rourke said calmly. "You strung a woman up like an animal." "She stole from me." "You stole her land." The room held its breath. Rourke leaned in. "You always had a problem with minding your own business." "That's why I'm still alive," Ethan replied. "The challenge." Rourke straightened. "Then let's settle it." Outside. High noon. The town emptied like a heartbeat. Lydia watched from the edge of the street, fear tightening her chest. Ethan and Rourke stood facing each other, sunlight blazing between them. Hands hovered. Time slowed. This was the West's final language. The last shot. The wind shifted. Guns cleared leather. 2 shots rang out almost as one. Rourke fell first. Ethan staggered, blood soaking his sleeve. Silence swallowed the town. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Looks like self-defense." No one argued. They never did. What remains after violence? Lydia ran to Ethan, gripping his arm. "You're hurt." "I've had worse," he said, forcing a smile. They left town that afternoon. No one stopped them. The West rarely did. The oak tree one last time. They rode past the old oak on their way south. The rope was gone. Only the branch remained, scarred, but standing. Lydia reached out, brushing her fingers against Ethan's hand. "I don't know what comes next," she said. Ethan looked ahead, hat low, eyes steady. "Out here," he said. "That's the only honest way to live." Ending strong, emotional, thumbnail matching. As the sun dipped low, the rancher rode on, a woman beside him, the past behind him, and the open West ahead. The land would forget the men who tried to break her, but it would remember the rancher in the black hat who stood still beneath an oak tree and chose to act when the world expected him not to.